Eric Brody here today to tell you about an awesome software instrument called Massive from Native Instruments. Since its release in 2007, Massive has become one of the most popular plug-in synthesizers for electronic music production. And to top it off, it's very DSP friendly, allowing you to easily open multiple instances per project. Massive can be used as a VST plugin within any digital audio workstation or as a standalone program. The synth itself has diverse sonic capabilities and can truly act as a Swiss Army knife in any producer's toolkit. Massive comes bundled with Maschine as part of Complete Select, and right out of the box it has a huge preset collection. Tons of expansion packs are also available. All of the Maschine expansion packs also include some really great Massive preset refills. Right here I have a Maschine project loaded up with a few of my favorite Massive patches. Some good bells, great leads, pads, bass, classic one called Baseball. This one I love called 1991. I actually heard this one in Drake's new song Teenage Fever. So onto the layout of the synth. I'm going to begin by resetting the patch. I have a blank one right here, but if you want to reset it, you click File, New Sound. The left-hand side of Massive is home to 3 oscillators and an extra modulation oscillator, as well as noise and feedback controls. So that's a noise oscillator. This creates a feedback loop. Massive as a synth is based on wavetable synthesis. Wavetable synthesis utilizes waveforms as an oscillator source. Analog synths traditionally use simple waves such as a saw or triangle as the core of their sound generation, but in a wavetable synthesizer, a whole series of individual waves can be accessed and played back. Wavetables can be used to create subtle changes to the sound or complex evolutions between wave types. The wavetable position knob sweeps through a cycle of the waveform and morphs as it shifts focus. It's this knob right here. Massive oscillators have separate controls for pitch, wavetable position, intensity, and amplitude. If I double click on any of these parameters after I move them, they'll go back to their default setting. The sound created from these oscillators can be driven through 2 separate filters, which I will describe in detail in just a bit. The default wavetable oscillator shape is called square saw 1. So when the wavetable position knob is turned all the way left, the oscillator emits a square wave. Gradually turning the knob to the right turns it into a sawtooth. And I can get anywhere in between by turning that knob. You can actually choose between over 80 different wavetable oscillator shapes, and these are divided into 5 categories ranging from basic, analog, digital. If you're interested, there's a diagram online depicting the actual shapes of all of these wavetables. For the intensity control, this works differently depending on which setting you choose in the drop-down menu. All of these have the effect of changing the overall harmonic balance while still maintaining some of the original character of the wavetable. Kind of like a filter. The modulation oscillator generates a sine wave modulation signal to create effects like ring, phase, position, and frequency modulation on whatever destination oscillator you designate. The modulation oscillator can have really cool effects on whatever carrier you choose and has a ton of sound design potential, especially when the position knob has a modulator assigned to it. You can change the pitch of the modulator, and I'm getting a ring mod on that first oscillator now. I'll get phase modulation if I turn this on. Get some crazy effects. You can send one of these to each different oscillator. The noise section has 12 different noise types that can be mixed into any patch using the color and amplitude knobs. The feedback section allows you to reroute the signal from any different insert point back to the filter input. This can be routed back from any of the feedback points in the routing stage. So you can change what's actually being fed back and get different types of distortion. Depending on what kind of channel you've got going on. Let's see. Under the oscillator tab, you have the controls for global glide. That's if you have your voicing set to monophonic. You can change the pitch bend range and vibrato settings. To the left of this tab, you'll see the oscillator key tracking options and the filter. To the right of this tab, you'll see the oscillator key tracking options and the filter key tracking options. The key tracking options for oscillator basically make it so that each key plays a different note, whereas if you had this flat, each key will play the exact same note. For filter key tracking, it works differently. The lower notes you can actually set to have more of a filter on it, and the higher notes have less of a filter, so the filter opens up as you get to the higher notes. Kind of creates a little bit more of an organic synth type sound. I'm going to initialize this patch again so it goes back to normal. Under the voicing tab, you will see polyphony options where you can switch between poly and monophonic settings. That's really useful if you want to do a lead and have it glide up. So this is just going to allow one voice. If I just set that to 1, even if I have polyphon on. When I have monophon on and I go over to the oscillator side, I can make a long glide upwards. And I can actually modulate this from the internal envelope if I wanted to have some sort of extra attack, quick attack, long attack for the glide time or the rate time. Under the routing tab, you can view the overall signal flow all the way from the oscillators to the master output. Under the global tab, you can adjust how CPU intensive the plugin will be. Ultra being the highest intensivity and Eco being the least. You can also initialize the patch, adjust global tuning, and BPM of the patch. You can also randomize elements of the patch, which is awesome. You can click these and it'll just randomize certain parameters. That controls the percentage of how much you're going to randomize that parameter. So if you hit randomize a couple of times, you get some crazy stuff. Okay, onto the filter section. The filter section is located to the right of the oscillators and can be set to function in serial or parallel modes or in a mixture of both via the crossfader. This can get confusing, so I'm going to go into detail with this regarding what it means to run these filters in serial versus parallel and the mixture of the two. But first, I'm going to give you a basic overview of what a filter does. Filters are used to process audio in order to alter the harmonic content of the signal. This has the effect of changing the sound's timbre or color. The essential parameters of a filter are its cutoff frequency and slope. Many filters used in audio signal processing also use resonance to sharpen the response of a filter. Resonance basically functions by feeding back some of the filter's output to its input so that part of the signal gets run through the filter multiple times. Resonance tends to make the filter cutoff response sharper and also produces a response peak at the cutoff frequency. So if I turn a filter on and I turn the resonance up, you actually hear that peak at the cutoff frequency. The slope of the filter shapes the filter type. There are many different types of filters, but the most common types used in synths are low pass, which eliminate the frequencies above the cutoff, high pass, which eliminate frequencies below the cutoff, band pass, which eliminate frequencies that are not within a specified band on either side of the center frequencies, notch filters, which eliminate only the frequencies that are within a specified band on either side of a center frequency, and comb filters, which consist of a series of notches. Massive has 12 filter types available, and 2 filters are available per patch. Each filter has its own volume control to the right of it. In Massive, when the filters are set all the way to serial, the audio runs like a direct, straight signal chain. The oscillator is sent into the first filter, and the first filter runs directly into the second filter. Even if the oscillator's filter output control is set in the middle to send equal levels of the signal to both filters, 1 and 2, when Massive runs in serial mode, you do not hear the signal flow split. When the filter is set all the way to parallel, the audio running from the oscillators is split depending on the oscillator's filter mix output, so the same signal goes through both filters 1 and 2. So when you're in parallel mode, you have the same signal going through both 1 and 2. And if you have the mix up here, and this is in the middle, you hear them both equally. Both signals are then summed together based on the mix level designated to the right of each filter. Massive allows you to blend a mixture of serial signal flow with parallel signal flow, making sound design potential truly vast. Basically, you can have it go straight through here and a little bit split. This splits the signal either if you want it to go directly through filter 1 or how much level you want to go through each filter. This is the filter volume. Okay, on to the modulation section of Massive. This system works in a simple way. Each of Massive's knobs have one or more modulation slots underneath them. That's these little squares right here. And each modulation source, envelopes, LFOs, and 8 macro controls, has a modulation handle that can be dragged and dropped into any of these slots. The slot then becomes a control that enables you to dictate how much the modulation source affects the modulation destination. So if I wanted to put, say, an LFO on the filter cutoff, I can drag this right here. And that's a sine wave adjusting the filter cutoff at that designated modulation level. The visual representation of this is given with the ring that surrounds the knob. As each knob has at least one modulation slot, there are millions of possible modulation combinations, and you can save preset modulation curves within both the envelope and the LFO pages. You can save those curves right here. Massive's four envelopes feature settings for attack, decay, sustain, and release, and morphing functions. Envelope 4 by default is assigned to the amplitude modulator and is therefore controls the ADSR curve for all the oscillators. You can use it to make percussive sounds with a low sustain level and short decay. And with a full sustain level, the notes will play for as long as you hold them down. If you open the release, sounds will fade out. Another useful function for the envelopes is the ability to create looped envelopes. So you can do that by turning the loop level all the way up, turn the knobs down, keep that level up. Do some cool stuff like that. Yeah. Massive has 4 LFO generators. LFO stands for low frequency oscillation. Low frequency oscillation is an electronic signal which is usually below 20 Hz and creates a rhythmic pulse or sweep. The pulse or sweep is used to modulate a parameter in synthesizers. Each of the 4 LFO generators can be put in LFO, random, stepper, or performance mode. This is LFO mode. Each of the LFOs has actually the ability to combine two different LFO sweeps together to form unique modulation. You can control the mix level between the two curves with the crossfade curve fader, and you can designate the shape of each LFO and its phase position. That's these right here. You can also add another internal envelope to any parameter within the LFO page. In performer mode, I'll show you how to do that really quick. Here it's speeding up gradually. That's the internal envelope. In the performer mode, you can treat modulation like a kind of a cross between a multi-stage envelope and a tempo synced LFO by writing specific curve shapes and levels per step. You can randomize this if you hit that. Turn that down. And you can actually choose curves to add in to each one of these here. So I can just really draw that in. In the stepper mode, it acts more like a basic step sequencer. Massive's insert effects have great distortion modes. You can adjust their position in the signal chain via the routing tab, and like all other knobs, they can be modulated. Routing tab, insert, great for distortion stuff. Basically, you put it wherever you want, if it's before the filter, after the filter, before the effect. Let's see, Massive has two global effects which apply to the master channel of the sound and are also very useful. Here you can add reverb, flanger, chorus, phaser, delay, expander to tube overdrive to the patch. Massive also has a master EQ to the right of this effects too, and this is helpful for adding like a tilt EQ to the overall sound. Lastly, you can use Massive's macro knobs to assign individual parameters or groups of parameters to one easily accessible control. An initialized patch in Massive, if I just initialize it again, comes pre-designated with a vibrato control on macro number 1. This macro will also be synchronized with the modulation wheel on your keyboard. Again, you can edit the vibrato from the oscillator tab. In the oscillator tab, I can change that vibrato setting. When using macro controls, it can be really cool to apply opposing reactions from multiple parameters to one knob, so that when you turn the macro, one parameter may go up while another goes down. So if I put this here, make it go up, put the filter on, and I apply this over here, and make it go down. Now when I turn that knob, I'm getting wavetable position to turn counterclockwise and cutoff frequency to turn clockwise. Really cool stuff when you put it on a lot of different things. These knobs are also really easy to assign to a MIDI controller to optimize dynamic performance. Simply 2-finger click on the drop-down menu and select MIDI Learn to move a parameter on your controller. This concludes my informational video on Native Instruments Massive. It's an awesome instrument, and it's really cool sometimes just to initialize the patch and hit random a couple times, but you can dissect a patch, really learn a lot from one, and sometimes less is more with this thing. Really, you can get some awesome sounds from just the basics. Alright, cool. Hope you enjoyed it.